Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to, before I start my question, ask if I understood Mr. Horn to have replied to Ms. Norton that you would respond only to requests from the chairman and therefore not to requests from any other member of the committee?
The administration's policy is to respond on matters of oversight, to respond to requests from
only from the chairman. I don't have time. So your answer is yes, only to from the chairman, nobody else.
Only to the committee, yes.
So you ignore everybody else, not to the committee, to the chairman. Only if a request comes from the chairman, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Let me just say that that is an obnoxious and unprecedented, I understand you didn't say it, but it's an obnoxious and unprecedented contempt for Congress, which is intolerable. Mr. Horn, at a January press conference, the President promised to track profits received by his hotels from foreign governments and to donate those profits to charity or to the U.S. Treasury. In May, in response to a bipartisan request from the Oversight Committee, the Trump Organization stated it was, quote, impractical, unquote, to, quote, fully and completely identify all patronage, unquote, at its hotels. Now, Mr. Horn, do you have any reason to believe that the President and his company, that is his private company, is following through on his January promise to track and donate all foreign monies received by his hotels?
My role is to make sure that the agency is administering the lease, and as far as I know, that clause is not in the lease.
So your answer is you do not know?
I don't know.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. Has GSA sought to amend the lease or otherwise enter into an agreement to require the Trump Organization to track payments by foreign governments?
No.
It has not?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Have you contacted the Department of Justice or the Office of Government Ethics and asked for assistance or direction on evaluating whether the Trump Organization is violating the Foreign Emoluments Clause of the U.S. Constitution by not tracking these payments by foreign governments?
Again, our role is to administer the lease. We'll leave judgment about emoluments to...
But in administering the lease, you have to determine, presumably, whether you're administering something legally. You can't simply ignore it.
And as I've stated, the contracting officer has made the determination that the tenant is in full compliance with the lease.
Okay. Now, the Foreign Emoluments Clause that has been mentioned before applies not just to the President, members of Congress, but to anyone holding an office of profit or trust under the United States. Are any other GSA properties leased by an elected official, officer, or employee of the federal government?
I don't know the answer.
Do you make any attempt to find out?
I'd be happy to look into it and follow up.
No, but do you make any attempt? Is it a normal practice to try to find out when someone signs a lease, or are you ignoring that provision of the Constitution? Which is it?
It would be a normal practice for the contracting officer who makes the decision about lease award to make sure that the awardee was in compliance with the lease. But
you don't know if that includes looking into whether the lessee is an employee of the U.S. government?
To the degree that if that's a term and condition of the lease, then...
No, it's not a term and condition of the lease. It's a term and condition of the Constitution.
Again, GSA's role is to determine compliance with the lease and applicable laws.
And the Constitution is not applicable?
Of course it is.
Okay. So why don't you make... It would seem then it would be incumbent on you to look into that in every case, or at least to ask about it.
Well, again, we have 12,000 employees that make these decisions all across the country. It's their role to look into.
Okay, and you have no policy.
It's my job to oversee.
And you have no policy to obey the law. Do any other GSA properties help to facilitate payments from foreign governments to federal elected office holders?
Please repeat the question.
Do any other GSA properties help to facilitate payments from foreign governments to federal elected office holders?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay. Between October 1st and March 31st, lobbyists working on behalf of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia spent $270,000 on rooms, catering, and parking at the Trump Hotel. In December of last year, Bahraini diplomats moved the country's National Day festivities to the hotel's ballroom. In February, Kuwait moved its annual gala from the Four Seasons to Trump International. Does the old post office lease agreement prohibit, is it appropriate for the GSA to maintain a lease that allows foreign governments to make payments as I've just mentioned, all in each case, that directly benefit a government official, in this case, the President of the United States?
Sir, we manage the terms and conditions of the lease. The contracting officer has determined that the tenant is in compliance with the lease. We don't manage day-to-day operations. Our job is to administer the lease. We don't get involved in day-to-day operations of the hotel.
But your legal department has made no determination, one way or the other, whether payments from foreign governments to an entity leased from the GSA by a government official, in this case the President of the United States, constitutes a violation of the Emoluments Clause or not. You're simply agnostic on that point.
Our legal department has supported the decision of the contracting officer.
Has it made an opinion on that?
That the tenant is in full compliance.
Has it made an opinion on it that we can have?
Lease.
Has it made an opinion on that? That's my question.
Our Office of Legal Counsel supports the contracting officer.
Has it made an opinion?
Gentleman's time has expired.
No, but he's got to answer the question.
The gentleman's time has expired.
He's got to answer the question.
The gentleman's time has expired.
But he should
The gentleman's time has expired.
But he should answer the question.
Your question was asked after your time has expired.
No, it wasn't.
We'll have a second round. There are three basic issues. One, the contract only restricts an elected official from entering the contract. There is no breach. Two, there are no conflicts. The President is exempted by law. And three, there are respected legal experts who say there is no constitutional problem.
Thank you, Mr. Horn. You've stated repeatedly that the contracting officer made the decision that the lease was in compliance with the Emoluments Clause and with all necessary legal things, correct?
I said that the contracting officer made the determination that the tenant was in full compliance with the terms and conditions of the lease.
And this was based in part, at least, on a written opinion on written advice from legal counsel.
I don't know if it was written advice. I know that there were multiple meetings where multiple GSA lawyers participated in conversations about the proposed new ownership structure.
Mr. Horn, GSA has told us it was written advice. So someone in your operation knows that it's written advice and has told us that. So my question is, we get a copy of that written advice?
We're committed to working with the committee.
I didn't ask that. I said, can we get a copy of that written advice? I'm requesting that right now.
We're committed to working with the committee.
Can you give me a yes or no question? On my request and the request of the ranking member, I assume, will you give us a copy of that written advice, assuming it exists?
We will provide all materials associated with this project when requested by the committee.
By which you mean by the committee chairman?
Yes.
Or his staff? So in other words, the answer is no. You will not give it to us unless the committee chairman requests it, because you're ignoring the minority party.
We're complying with the
You're complying with the order to ignore
policy.
the minority party. Now, Mr. Chairman, rather Mr. Horn, our staff has learned that Mr. Kushner has held discussions regarding candidates for the permanent administrator position. We've also learned he's been engaged in selecting the FASTA board. How is this activity consistent with his recusal from Old Post Office matters, considering the OPO lease is one of the highest profile matters in GSA's portfolio?
I'm not aware of Mr. Kushner's role at the White House.
Okay, let me rephrase the question. Assuming he has that role, that he is involved in screening or interviewing candidates for the permanent administrator position, would this be a violation of his recusal?
I'm not going to speculate.
I'm not asking for speculation. I'm saying, if that is true, would this be?
I'm not going to comment on hypotheticals.
Okay. Now, you said in answer to a question before that you didn't get monthly statements, you only got annual statements.
I said that I'm not aware of monthly statements. I am aware that there's a requirement for an annual report that will decide what the profit-sharing arrangement will be. If there are monthly reports, I have not seen them.
You're not aware of
which is consistent with my approach to this entire project. That it's the contracting officer's job.
You're not aware of a requirement for monthly statement that would give the same information as the you just mentioned.
Correct.
Okay. Section 5.3 of the lease requires that monthly statement. Shall I read the whole thing to you?
Sure.
Well, I'm going to read only part of it because it's lengthy. Tenant will furnish landlord on or before the 45th day after the end of each calendar month the following items accompanied by a certificate of the chief financial officer of tenant certifying such items are true, et cetera, et cetera. Monthly and year-to-date statements of income and expenses on an accrual basis, et cetera, et cetera. I can give you the rest of it.
Okay.
This requires the monthly statement that you said you didn't know existed. So my question is, what will you do to make sure, A, that the monthly statement is being filed, and then to answer the questions you've received from members of the committee regarding that regarding information that would appear on that monthly statement?
So I'll go back, work with the leadership of the Public Building Service to make sure that monthly statements as required by the lease are being received from the tenant. And once again, we're committed to providing information about this project to the committee.
And are you committed to making those monthly statements available to members of the committee?
We're committed to, we're committed to responding to requests from the committee for information.
Okay, so once again, you're saying the answer is no unless the Republican leadership of the committee wants it. And as long as a cover-up is being continued, we're not going to see that information. That's what you're saying?
I'm saying that we will comply with the administration's policy and the
Okay, and the
opinion
administration's policy is that, as you've acknowledged it, is that minority members of the committee are entitled to no information, and therefore they can continue the cover-up. I yield back. I thank you.